Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, I've got something special for the people out there who are in the Gen X era. I was rummaging through a lot of, podcasts today, and I ran across a guy who I've been following on TikTok for a while, but, honestly, I really didn't know he had an actual, podcast. The Dad Bod Veteran, which is a Gen X guy. He looks pretty burly. And he talks about how and why Gen Xers are the way they are. And for the most part, it's funny. For the most part, he gets 50% right and 50% wrong. And the reason why I say 50% right and 50% wrong is I don't know how old this guy is, but I'm going to guess he was born past 1975. Maybe, he was born at least past 1975. And the reason why I say that is because he leans a lot into some 80s, but I think he's got some mental disabilities. And when I say mental disabilities, what I mean is he's forgetting a lot of things. His memory of what actually happened with us Gen Xers is wrong. And when I ran across this today, I was like, there's no way in hell this guy knows what it was like to be in front of a TV on Saturday morning for Saturday morning cartoons. And I'm telling you right now, it's true. Back when Gen Xers were growing up and enjoying their latchkey kid life, the one thing that you can count on every Saturday morning was the kids sitting or laying in front of the TV starting at 7 o'clock in the morning. From 7 o'clock until 11:30. Sometimes noon, depending on the channel, because you only had 3 at that point in time. And when I mean that point in time, I mean we're talking from 75 to 82, okay? Because in 82, 80, from 80 until 85, okay, you had cable. And you had lots of other options if you had the financial means to actually have cable. They were premium channels, but you had them. But for a majority of us, there was 3 channels: ABC, NBC, CBS. That was it. And on Saturday mornings, you were locked in, ready to roll between 7 and 8. Before your parents got up, before you had to do Saturday chores, before you were able to run wild in the streets. You were locked in, right? So Dad Bod Veteran, he had a nice little podcast talking about Saturday morning cartoons. Some of it he got right. Some of it he didn't get right. So we're going to critique and we're going to correct. And to some part, we're going to agree. Here's a little bit of Dad Bod Veteran. Let's see what he's got to say, and we're going to correct it.
What's the one thing from childhood that taught you discipline, patience, timing, and self-control without a single adult ever explaining how it worked?
And that would be Saturday morning cartoons.
It wasn't school, it wasn't church, and it wasn't your parents.
What?
It was something that happened only once a week, only for a few hours, and if you missed it, you were out of luck. No replays.
Now, granted, you also have to understand that that was almost everything up until 83, 85, before the VCR actually became mainstream affordable. Okay. After that, you had VCRs and you could record this shit. But up until that point,
No catching up, and no, I'll watch it later.
and this was anything on TV. Anything on TV. Not just Saturday mornings, but everything.
And somehow that thing shaped how an entire generation understands anticipation, commitment, and when fun officially ends. Today, we're talking about Saturday morning cartoons. But not the shows, not the theme songs, and
Which he actually goes into shows and theme songs that he's completely incorrect.
not even the cereal. We're talking about why they worked, why they can't exist anymore, and the quiet rule that taught us that we didn't realize until adulthood. And the answer to why noon mattered so much. But don't worry, we'll get there. This is All Things Gen X, and I am the Dad Bod veteran, and I am Gen X. And if you ever woke up early on purpose, this one is for you. Saturday morning cartoons didn't start when you turned on the TV. They started on Friday night because you went to bed knowing.
Now, you also have to understand when he says it started when he went to bed, to some cases you're right. But you also have to understand that back in the later 70s, early 80s, we didn't go to bed until Friday Night Electric. Was it Friday Night Electric? Oh my God, I can't believe I actually forgot this. What was that show? I think I just screwed up. Let's see here. I'm looking for it because I know what it was. It was No, that's not it. Wasn't that? We'll continue with this. We'll continue to watch this until I find it.
Something special was coming. No school, no alarm clock, and no backpack. You woke up on a Saturday early on purpose.
That's impossible!
Not because an adult told you to, because your body knew. You'd stumble out to the living room quietly because waking parents before coffee was dangerous. The TV was a console TV, wood paneling, heavy enough to survive an earthquake and absolutely unstealable. You didn't sit on the couch because those were for adults. You laid on the floor, on your stomach, chins in hand, as close to the screen as physically possible. And then you waited.
Damn ads. Damn ads. Damn ads. Damn ads. Damn ads.
So it begins.
Because cartoons didn't just start, they ramped up. Saturday morning cartoons existed because of a very specific moment in American history. In the 1950s through the 1970s, networks realized that kids were home on Saturday mornings, parents were asleep, and advertisers wanted uninterrupted access to the kids.
Money, money, money.
Weekdays were for schools, Sunday mornings were for church, Saturday mornings were wide open. By the late 1960s and 1970s, networks like ABC, CBS, and NBC began building entire blocks of children's programming. By the 1980s, it became an arms race.
And this is actually true. I mean, literally, the networks actually targeted. And when you look back, you're like, damn.
Who had the best lineup? Who owned the toy aisle? And who ruled childhood? This wasn't random, it was programming warfare.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Now, you can't talk about Saturday morning cartoons without talking about cereal, because cereal wasn't food. It was fuel for the ritual.
It's Golden Grams of Gold giveaway. Millions will play, 1,000 will win. Every specially marked box has a free color marker.
It wasn't breakfast in the adult sense, it was sugar disguised as responsibility.
Oh, the cereal's good.
You didn't pour cereal because you were hungry, you poured cereal because the TV was on and that's what you did.
Why? Because it's what you do.
And it mattered.
Now, this was this is kind of a misnomer. And I'm not saying that, this wasn't done. I'm just saying that it wasn't done in the way he's explaining it. Okay. I'm not saying it wasn't done. I'm not saying that you didn't do it. If you're a Gen Xer and you're sitting in front of a TV with a bowl of cereal, I'm not saying that you didn't do it, because I did it. Okay. Didn't do it every Saturday, but we did it. Okay. But it wasn't that big of a ritual that he's making it seem to be. Okay. I'm not saying that we didn't have our bowl of cereal, but it wasn't that staple thing that he's trying to make it out to be. And it wasn't that we, filled up a freaking mixer bowl full of cereal, okay? Come on. It wasn't exactly like that. There's a lot of exaggeration here.
Which cereal? If you had Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, you felt powerful. If you had General Mills Lucky Charms, you felt chaotic. And if you had Captain Crunch, well, you accepted that the roof of your mouth was a sacrifice that you were willing to make. But most of us had the knockoff of the cereals we love from a bag. Nobody questioned the ingredients.
And we did.
Nobody asked about nutrition. Because Saturday morning cereal wasn't meant to sustain you. It was meant to keep you still.
It wasn't meant to keep you still. That's what the cartoons are for. The cereal was to pump you up once the cartoons stopped.
In the bowl, that mattered too. Because no child actually used a reasonable...
Yeah, we all used reasonable bowls. We always did. Now, that bowl could have also been a repurposed Cool Whip bowl with the spaghetti stain. You know which bowl we're talking about.
Bowl. You would normally use the biggest bowl in the house, which sometime was a mixing bowl.
No.
And milk was always poured...
The milk was always poured perfect. Unless you were gay. Okay? It was. Now, there were some people who liked a lot of milk. There was some people who didn't like a lot of milk. But the milk was actually poured perfect. Come on. Once you got to a point to where you were actually pouring your own milk, you understood how much milk you were going to use, and it was perfect. This is exaggeration to the degree of end.
Second, and always too much, and sometimes not enough. And by the third commercial break, the milk was warm. But that didn't matter.
That shit was gone by the third commercial break.
Because you weren't there for the cereal. You were there for time suspension. And the commercials, they were as important as the show.
And the commercials were. This is where we got our Christmas lists. Along with, Sears and JCPenney catalogs.
Cereal companies didn't just advertise during cartoons, they pretty much owned them. They were selling the toys inside the box, contests, mail-in prizes, and the idea that breakfast could be fun. So you didn't just eat the cereal, you identified with it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say you identified with it, really, depending on the family. Okay, really, because there were families out there who got your Fruit Loops, who had your, Cocoa Puffs and stuff like that, right? Then you had the families out there who are eating, Chex Wheats and Corn Chex and Corn Flakes. So you didn't identify with that shit. You ate what you had and you ate what you were given. This is a lot of exaggeration right there. This is really a lot of exaggeration.
Maybe you were a Trix kid or a Honey Nut Cheerios kid pretending to be responsible.
You were whatever kid that your parents bought the cereal. That's what you were. Because let's be honest, okay? I don't know any child in the Gen X area that was able to really pick out their cereal. You got what your parents paid. Come on. You didn't identify with whether you were Rice Krispies or Cheerios or, Captain Crunch. You didn't. You got what your parents bought. If you were, well off, you got the Captain Crunch. You got the Cocoa Puffs. You got the Count Chocula, right? If you were middle of the road, you were getting Rice Krispies. You were getting, Wheat Chex. You were getting Corn Flakes. If you're at the bottom, it was whatever was on sale.
responsible, or a Cocoa Pebbles kid who had already accepted chaos as a lifestyle. And here's the thing nobody talks about enough, is that the parents allowed it.
No way.
Saturday morning cereal was a parent-approved indulgence.
It wasn't an indulgence. See, this is where he's getting it wrong. It wasn't an indulgence because they didn't know it was bad. Okay? They didn't care to a certain degree, but there were some out there who didn't care, and there were some out there who cared, and you were eating grape nuts. Come on. This is wrong.
They knew it was junk, and they didn't care.
They didn't
because
care.
This was a deal. You stayed quiet.
Yeah, this is the deal. You were quiet. You turned on that TV to a volume that you could hear when you were 3 feet away from the screen, and their bedroom was, down the hall to the left with the door closed. If they heard it, that was the end of it. So you made sure that level was perfect, and you didn't make a sound.
You stayed inside, and you let them sleep. That bowl of cereal bought everyone peace. And there was no refilling. That was kind of understood.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, but there was quite a refilling. There was quite a refilling because they weren't up. They weren't up to tell you. They were not up to tell you, you can't have another bowl of cereal. No, this is wrong. This is wrong too. And there were lots of times. There were lots of times where, we would actually make our own breakfast, pancakes, French toast, just made.
One bowl. If you finished early, that was on you. If you spilled the milk on the carpet, that was your problem as well. Saturday morning cereal.
If you spilled the milk on the carpet, you wiped it up and you hoped to God that thing weren't going to walk out and notice the wet spot until it dried. That was it. That was it. You prayed to God that nobody noticed, and you probably, what you did is you placed your, here's the spill, you placed your butt right here and you crossed your legs to hide it until it dried. That was on you, but you didn't clean it up.
Cereal taught Gen X portion awareness, self-regulation, and that indulgence has boundaries. Because when the cartoons ended at noon, so did the cereal. You rinsed the bowl, put it in the sink, and...
No, you wash that shit. You wash that shit. Because if not, if you walked out there with a bowl on the sink and it was rinsed and it wasn't clean, you were getting your ass whooped.
went outside. Sugared up, unsupervised, and ready for whatever the rest of the day was going to throw at you. Now let's talk about...
No, it's not what the day threw at you. It's what we threw at the day. Come on, it was Saturday. If you weren't in school, you were rampant. Rampant crazy across the land. Mad Max, if Mad Max was created when we were running around the streets, wouldn't have survived.
About the cartoon lineup, because the cartoon lineup was built very intentionally at the intersection of culture.
Now, unfortunately, I'm going to let this run for a little bit because he got it wrong. This entire lineup, he got it wrong. And if you understood Saturday morning cartoons, you wouldn't get it wrong like this. This is so wrong. So wrong.
Culture, economics, and a generation that was spending more time alone than any kids before them. Let's start with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
All right. I'm gonna scroll this up. I'm gonna scroll this up because what's he talking about? Saturday morning cartoons, right? Look. Saturday morning cartoons, right? Nobody remembers He-Man on Saturday morning. Never happened. Never happened. Never happened.
Because this one explains an entire decade.
Now, his dissertation of what He-Man was about is spot on. but it never happened on Saturday.
He-Man was created in the early 1980s
Never in the morning.
at a time when toy companies realized something important. If you control the story, you control the play pattern. That wasn't a cartoon that happened to have toys, because the toys actually came first.
Yeah, the toys actually came like 3 years before this cartoon ever aired.
The cartoon existed to give them mythology, rules, and emotional weight. But here's the thing nobody talks about enough, is that He-Man wasn't just yelling and swords. Every episode ended with a moral lesson.
Well, he has to understand, it ended with a moral lesson, but it tied into the episode. Because every episode had a moral story to it.
People who succeed are the ones who work for what they want. So don't be fooled by those who say they have a sure thing.
Because adults were worried. Gen X kids were unsupervised, watching TV alone and absorbing.
No, he got it wrong. Parents weren't worried. They were sleeping in their bed, asleep. They were not worried. They didn't care. They were not worried.
Everything. And the compromise was, we'll sell them toys, but we'll also teach restraint, honesty, and responsibility.
They weren't paying attention. They were not paying attention to these cartoons. Because first of all, they weren't played on Saturday. Second of all, they didn't pay attention.
That's
99% of the time when this cartoon was aired, they weren't home from work yet.
why He-Man feels half epic fantasy and half after-school special. Then there was my favorite, G.I. Joe, a real...
Again, G.I. Joe never played on Saturday mornings. Ever. Never. You want to know when it played on? I'll tell you here in a bit once he runs it down. Again, his critique was really good as far as the show goes because he said he wasn't going to talk about the cartoons and he got screwed up on them, but nonetheless.
American hero. Which existed in a very specific Cold War moment. This show came out when America was deeply invested in the idea of patriotism, teamwork, and clearly defined good and evil.
And this is for the U.S. Army!
G.I. Joe wasn't about war.
No. Again, his breakdown of the cartoon and what it was about was spot on. This was going on during the Cold War, the end of the USSR. Reagan was in power. Strength, peace through strength. This was all encompassing. But it wasn't Saturday.
It was about the roles. Every character had a speciality, a job, and a responsibility.
Now, he is actually breaking down why Gen X is the way they are. And if you actually listen to a couple of his podcasts, he'll actually explain to you why Gen X is the way they are. And G.I. Joe is one of those cartoons that depicts exactly why Gen X is who we are when it comes into the world, into the business world, into our work ethic, into how we see things when we work.
It taught Gen X something quietly important. You matter most when you know what you're good at. And yes, every episode ended with a lesson.
Again, the whole show had a lesson. Now, they incorporated the actual ending with a, nondescript lesson for whatever reason, but every show actually had a lesson of morals to it.
Fire spreads quickly. Call the fire department from outside the house.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Knowing is half the battle wasn't just a slogan, it was a reminder that information mattered, which
Information mattered.
tracks perfectly for a generation that grew up figuring out things alone. Now let's talk about Transformers, because this one was darker than people remember.
So, while it was semi-dark when it came out, there was a lot more darker shows out there in that time frame that I'll cover here in a few minutes. But, he makes it seem like it was really, really dark, and it was dark, but it wasn't that dark.
I shall pass the matrix of leadership as it was passed to me.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, and I'm the CEO of Phoenix Energy.
Ads.
Out at the merger between Japanese toy engineering and American storytelling, which is why it felt heavier. This was a war story. Characters died, planets were destroyed, and leadership had consequences. Optimus Prime wasn't a mascot. He was a burdened leader, and Gen X absorbed that. Transformers taught us that loyalty costs something, leadership isolates you, and that change is inevitable, which is why this one stuck so hard. Then came the Thundercats, which feels like a fever dream until you break it down.
Thundercats!
Because this one was about exile, orphans, a destroyed homeworld trying to rebuild culture somewhere unfamiliar. That hits different when you realize Gen X kids were the first generation raised during massive societal shifts, divorce, dual income household.
Now, with his interpretation and critique or explanation of the Thundercats was again kind of in the same realm. That's what we were experiencing when it actually, aired and stuff like that. But again, I'm sorry to say, my friend, still not Saturday.
And moving a lot. Thundercats wasn't silly. It was about adaptation. And to be honest, Mum-Ra scared adults. By the late 1980s, things shifted. Shows got smarter, more self-aware. And that's where Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes in.
And again, not Saturday.
Because this one broke the mold. It didn't take itself seriously, and that was the point.
Could we interest you in a subscription to Turtles Home Companion?
I'm not going to say it actually broke the mold, but... So this is his general list of Saturday morning cartoons. Poor man. Like I said, I don't know how old this guy is, but absolutely not a single one of these cartoons that he was referencing showed on Saturday morning. Very disappointing. Didn't do his research and apparently doesn't remember, because the moment I saw this, I was like, what? None of these showed up on Saturday. None of them. So He-Man first aired in 1983. Its first runtime was After School Weekly between 3 and 5, depending on where you're living at. 3 in the Eastern, 5, in the Western, like I said, right? That's not Saturday. After school. After school for every single one of these. G.I. Joe. I remember G.I. Joe well. I caught almost every episode, and if I didn't catch it, I frickin' recorded it, because it came out in, again, 1983. A little bit further, I think it was 1985 is when I actually started recording these series on our VCR. But it too ran between 3 and 4:30 in the afternoon after school. So between the years of 83 and 87, 88 is actually when Saturday morning cartoons shifted to after school, because the Gen Xers, okay, anybody born in that era was in a school. So they lost the capture of Saturday. They were old enough to where it wasn't that big of a deal, but after school was a big deal. So G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, again, didn't originally air on Saturday, and it never did. It aired between 3 and 4:30 after school. This guy got it wrong. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is the funny thing about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja. I didn't look this one up because I got flabbergasted. Let's see. Let me see if the AI Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle originally aired in 1987, and again, weekday afternoons. It did actually air on Saturday mornings, but most of them was showing in the mornings in 1990. Most of the Gen Xers were already in high school or in middle school. They weren't watching Saturday mornings, but it did originally air in the afternoons. So this one, he actually got correct. That it actually did air on Saturday, at least to a point. So why did he screw that up? Again, I don't know if it's his age. I don't know if it's because he has memory loss. I have no idea. Now, for all you Gen Xers who actually sat in front of the TV and who actually enjoyed Saturday morning cartoons, I'm going to throw a couple at you, okay? Because you ran through the things that he thought was running on Saturday, which never happened. They were popular when we were when Gen Xers were kids, but they weren't Saturday. Okay. So from 1975 to 1985, the most popular ones. Who can remember Scooby-Doo? Aired on Saturdays. The Super Friends aired on Saturdays. The Smurfs aired on Saturdays. Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner Show. That started in 78 and ran through 85. Classic. If you don't know Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes, that was Saturday morning cartoon. That was the epitome of Saturday morning cartoon. Alvin and the Chipmunks, again, actually ran on Saturdays. Early on, you had a lot of different other ones like Dungeons and Dragons. You had, there was another one out there like that. The Pink Panther actually ran on Saturdays. Land of the Lost, it wasn't a cartoon, but it still ran in that time slot. If you remember, that was actually a live action type of show. Captain Caveman and almost all of the Hanna-Barbera stuff ran on Saturday mornings. You had a lot of other stuff. I mean, Spider-Man and his, Amazing Friends started on Saturday. So there was a lot of Saturday morning cartoons that he completely forgot about. And when I mean completely forgot about, I mean he didn't even cover. Like I said, the fact that you had to wait until the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that actually aired on Saturdays, a majority of what he talked about, the Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man, Thundercats, those were all after school. Those were all after school. Not on Saturday. We weren't enjoying those on Saturday. And there was a lot of other cartoons that played on Saturday morning. The New Adventures of Batman, that was earlier. The Muppet Babies, that was Saturday morning. It's one of those things where he completely got this wrong. It's really sad. It's really sad that somebody who's in the Gen X don't remember what actual Saturday morning cartoons were about. Let's see what he says, and let's finish this out.
It mixed absurdity with action, humor with rebellion. It told Gen X kids you're allowed to laugh at the system, which at the time was a completely new concept.
Does the phrase, go suck a lemon, hold any meaning for you?
And then you hit the Disney Renaissance. DuckTales was capitalism with adventure, risk, reward, and consequences, but also fun.
Again, DuckTales wasn't on Saturday morning.
By the early 90s, we got the sharpest blade of all, Animaniacs.
It's time for Animaniacs.
And again, the Animaniacs were not on Saturday morning. Just wasn't.
This show wasn't just for kids. It was for parents who were half watching and kids who were catching jokes they weren't supposed to.
I found prints. No, fingerprints. I don't think so.
It was fast, it was sarcastic, it was referential. Animaniacs marked the moment Saturday morning cartoons admitted something. The Gen X kids were smarter than adults had expected.
So the original Animaniacs in 1990 actually started running typically on Saturday mornings. Wow. Between 8 and 11. I do not remember that. I was older by that time because in 1990 I graduated high school. So that's actually a possibility. I am wrong there. I remember watching it after school. I remember watching it in the afternoons. I don't remember Saturday morning. I remember this in the afternoons, but he's right on this one.
I'd say puberty was inordinately kind to you.
And that's the real purpose of Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah, 1993. So if you were born in 1980, which is the last year of the Gen X, you were 13 years old. Maybe, I guess. Like I said, I remember seeing it more in the afternoons than I do remember anything else, to be honest with you. Interesting. Yeah, 1993. Wow. Did not realize that. I hate these ads.
We're cultural translators. They explain good versus evil, teamwork, humor, restraint, rebellion, leadership, and of course, consequences.
Yep.
All before noon.
Yep.
And then, just like that,
But not before.
they were gone. Because childhood had a clock. And when it hit noon,
Yeah, the clock was 1995. Because if you were born in 1980, you were 15 years old in 1995. That's when the clock ended. And that's when cartoons on a daily basis, a series, okay? Not just, random shit, but an actual series. And then you started getting into the MTV era of, Eon Flux and Beavis and Butthead on MTV and all that other stuff, which started showing later and later. And if I remember correctly, The Simpsons first aired first aired 1987 on the Tracy Ullman Show, and they aired in Sunday prime time 1989. The first actual showing was December 17, 1989. That's when things shifted. That's when Saturday morning cartoons became obsolete. When I say obsolete, you have time for it to dwindle, okay? Afternoon cartoons dwindled. But when The Simpsons first aired prime time, Saturday morning cartoons, the tombstone was already buried.
you were outside. At 12 p.m., cartoons were over.
Yep.
And the message was clear.
Yeah. So when when Saturday morning cartoons were over, there was 3 things that happened. Depending on who you were, what type of family, and what type of expectations were set upon you. Number 1, first expectation. You had chores. Yeah, clean the house. And that didn't stop until you were done. And you couldn't do shit until it was done. Okay? Number 2, if you didn't have rule number 1, number 2, you were gone. You were out the door, right? Number 3, if you didn't have rule number 1, you had rule number 3. And rule number 3 is usually you have yard work to do. You had other things that you had to do, expected to be done on Saturday before you could go run amok. Because you have to understand that for the most part, from the time we got out of school, including summer break, winter break, spring break, we were expected to do our homework when we got home, and then we had until the lights came on to be back home. So depending on the type of student you were, study all day in the bedroom, to, fuck it, I'll worry about it tomorrow, you were gone. Saturdays were the days that you had some expectations because your parents were home. Your parents were around. Monday through Friday, your parents weren't home until 5, 6, 7 o'clock. On Saturdays, they were home, so they were able to instruct you, put the fear of God in you, and make sure that what they wanted done. And that's the typical. That was a typical Saturday morning for most people. If I'm wrong, it's a few. Okay? I'm not saying that my life experiences were exactly the same, but at the same time, I'm also saying that for the typical, that's the way it was. You had those 3 options. If your parents were up, you were doing what they were wanting to do until they were done with you. If they weren't up and the cartoon was over, you still were expected to do something before you were able to be let go. And there was a very few minority. And when I mean very few, we're talking maybe 10, 15% who didn't have to worry about that shit. Were off on their own, doing what they were doing. Right? So all in all, Dad Bod Veteran got the Saturday morning cartoon situation right. Cartoon's completely wrong. Education right. Cartoon's completely wrong. Nobody remembers the Transformers, G.I. Joe. Again, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They showed up when I stopped watching Saturday morning cartoons, so that might have happened. DuckTales, again. But he forgot all the other ones that were on there that were bigger at that time. Just saying. So anyways, we'll give this guy, this show was a 2 out of 5 because he got it completely wrong. Now, he's got a lot of their stuff right. He did get the critique and the breakdown of what those cartoons meant and what they were doing. That he had right. But that wasn't what that show was about. Saturday morning cartoons. Yeah, the rituals was right. He got the ritual correct. Just wrong cartoons. All right. So what do we want to talk about for the rest of the night? Yeah, we're gonna check. We gotta check the the trending. We got to check the trending. Let's see what everybody's talking about tonight. Okay. So apparently, let me see if this is correct. Now that's a notification. I want notification. I want that. Yeah. Apparently, this shows about 9 hours ago that the Karg Island we struck, I don't know how to pronounce this, Karg Island oil export hub. Looks like we did. Looks like we attacked it. Trump said the other day he was trying to avoid hitting any infrastructures and stuff like that. But it looks like we hit it. Ouch. That right there just, that cut the knees out from Iran, to be honest with you. Holy cow. So, as I was saying earlier, let's look at it. We're going to check the daily trends from Google, 24 hours. We're going to refresh it. Let's see. Refresh. U.S. Canada. Baseball. Again, Karg Island, number 2. Number 2 on the search list. Basketball. 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 Oh, extreme heat in Southern California. Ooh. Basketball. Baseball. Football. Football. Basketball. 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 AEP power outage. What's this? High winds. Woo. Okay. In North Ohio. That's a big one. All right. Pepsi Steri Astrophage burst. Okay. Pepsi dropped a new flavor. And I guess that's popular. And basketball. So out of the top 25, one thing about the Iran thing, everything else, except for the Pepsi and the energy thing, Pepsi and what was it at? AEP power outage. Top 25, everything else was sports. So again, let's look at the past 4 hours. Let's look at past 4 hours. That's football, basketball. Josh Naylor. Baseball. Austin Wells. Baseball. Yeah. Katie Nolan. Something about Jeopardy. Okay. Bo Naylor. Baseball. Nancy Woodrum. Okay. Ground stop DC airports. Passengers face hour long. That was 4 hours ago. Oh, okay. Blizzard warning in Minnesota. Well, what do you know? At least five. That's not bad. It looks like explore. Let's see. Trending news. And see, when you look at X, why is Joe Biden trending? That's crazy. Ooh. 5 hours ago, breaking, all 9 members of Antifa cell in Texas has been found guilty of terrorism, charges brought by the DOJ. Ooh. Holy cow. Interesting. Doesn't look like there's anything else that's major. Let's see what's big trending. SmackDown, that's wrestling. Sports. American actors, politics. Again, the Cug Island. Only on X. Sports. Entertainment. Sports. I gotta say, it's the same thing that I've been saying all week. A majority of the people don't give a fuck what's going on in Iran unless you're like dialed in. They don't give a fuck about what's going on in the country. All they're worried about is whether their favorite sports team is going to win this week. I don't know what to tell you. So with that being said, it is Friday night. This is the end of the stream for the week. I'll be back Monday. I'm going to build some new stuff up, maybe new intro, maybe new thumbnail. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. But I hope you all have a good weekend, and I will see you